way artists like Norman Lindsay in Australia saw the European War may seem simple now, but in 1914 appeals like these draw young men to a great adventure, to fight for a motherland most have never seen, to leave a country many will never see again. A first sailing 30,000 strong, 1,000 bank clerks, 1,200 shearers, every kind of man trained to become one kind of man, marching through the streets of the cities and towns of a nation cheering. It is November 1914. The manager of one Sydney newspaper says, "Going to the front. They'll keep the trained British regular army for the front. The nearest these'll get will be the line of communications." They are called 6 bob a day tourists. Someone says, "They'll never make soldiers of that lot. The light horse may be all right, but they've got the ragtag and bobtail of Australia in the infantry." With the convoy is the warship Sydney, which is to sink the German raider Emden off the Cocos Islands. Not just a chance to rest in the sun. Good weather saves many of the horses, of which it has been expected 20% will be lost. Throughout the voyage, training continues on all ships of the convoy, even if the drill squads do find it difficult to hold their lines on the heaving decks. Till Egypt, there has been little contact between the groups of men from New Zealand and from every state of Australia. But now they meet, and together they see for the first time a way of life totally unlike their own. The corn for their horses is ground in mills dating from the Bible. Camps are built at Mina, Mahdi, and Zitoun outside Cairo. And though training is intense, the nearness of the city creates a discipline problem. Replacing the unsuitable training area on bleak Salisbury Plain, British tents, piped water, a tramway, create a new camp in Egypt. Some troops follow the Empire force which routs the Turkish attempt to take the Suez Canal in February 1915. With the stalemate of the Western Front in Europe, it becomes Winston Churchill's dream to open a second front in the Balkans, to advance through the Narrows to the Turkish capital Constantinople, now called Istanbul. The attack is to come from the sea, with a British fleet assisted by French ships. Heavy naval guns are to blast the coastal forts. These protect the minefields and the German battle cruisers Goeben and Breslau, sheltering off Istanbul. The Navy fails and troops must be used. When the Gallipoli landings come, Turkish forces are on maneuvers. One commander is Mustafa Kemal, later Ataturk, leader of the Turkish nationalists. Seeing the danger, he brings the 57th Turkish Regiment to Ari Banu, where the Australians have landed, a place not even marked on the map he carries, and there launches a fierce counterattack. landings are to have been at 2 points. The 29th Division at Cape Helles and the Anzacs at Gaba Tepe, with 2 false diversionary attacks. Put ashore a mile from their correct position, many Australians and New Zealanders are separated from their units. The losses are greater than those of the Normandy landings of the Second World War. Withdrawal is advised, but General Hamilton orders the troops to dig in. 8 months after the first enrollments, the Anzacs find themselves not smashing the European stalemate, but fighting the same stationary war with trenches facing enemy trenches, some roofed over as protection against grenades and mortars, making one at Lone Pine a death trap under howitzer fire later. Soon, any attempt at observation over the rim of the parapet attracts heavy sniper fire. To these hazards are added those of poor rations, incessant work, tension, and the disease brought by the flies you see here, all weakening the men. And so the campaign drags on without real success for either side. Only one roll of film is ever taken at Gallipoli, but in these scenes, that anonymous War Office cameraman shows graphically the conditions that exist there. Built at the foot of the scrub-covered hills, these piers are the only access to water and rations. A new force of British troops is mustered at Imbros Island, within sight of Anzac. They are transferred to luggers for a landing at Suvla Bay to the north. On August 6, 1915, the Suvla Bay landings are accompanied by a new offensive launched at Anzac. The periscope rifle is an improvised protection, though in Europe it is abandoned. As here in this burning scrub, men go on fighting and dying, but there are no new gains. Though 50% casualties have been predicted, a planned withdrawal has to be made, but care and incredible luck keep this news from the enemy, and not one man is killed or abandoned. The hospital ships stand by to carry the sick and wounded away from the now deserted positions they have held. Again in Egypt, the survivors join new troops drawn from the heavy enlistments during the campaign. With the government drive for another 50,000 men, they double the AIF. Transferred to France, the Australians find women doing the farm work, their men away serving at the front. After Egypt and Gallipoli, these are pleasant conditions, with their chance to care for both the horses and equipment. The new skills which the war has already evolved need to be practiced. The training program is operated to keep each man as battle-ready as his weapons. Drills are carried out with the new Lewis guns. There are smoke bombs and cylinder gas and respirators. When the order to move up finally comes, it is to the peaceful front, the nursery sector south of Armentières, where there is a chance to grow used to the special conditions of the Western Front. Observation balloons being filled with gas just behind the front lines. Once fully airborne, they offer an unobstructed view of the battlefield, and from them observers can see the shell bursts and correct artillery range. This battery's fire is falling short. Above them it is noted and telephoned to the ground, where the signaller advises a British artillery officer.
Up to 101 round gunfire.
Planes are now used more frequently in the war. Always vulnerable to air attacks like their craft, these observers are later often shot down as the fighting grows more bitter. They said, "There's one trouble with this heavy trench mortar, you can never put two in the same place." The same place isn't there anymore. This kind of patterned artillery barrage is called a strafe. Sandbag breastworks are raised above the ground when it is seen that trenches fill with water. The build-up of forces on the Somme is joined by the Australians, their forces now 100,000 strong. The same build-up of supplies gives the British artillery a firepower it has never had. A bombardment lasting 5 days and striking several miles into the German lines is to precede the attack. This is 1916, with Verdun behind them and reverses in the Russian and Italian campaigns facing the High Command as they mount the first Somme offensive. Here, British troops take up their positions at La Boisselle. Over the top, first wave. Second wave. Behind come the moppers up. Their job, to fumigate all dugouts with bombs, clearing the pitted countryside of stragglers detached from the main forces. The ruins of Contalmaison, and in the chalk pits behind Pozières, where some of the most terrible shelling of the war takes place. Drum fire, so fierce that no single report is heard. Now the Australians face the full fury of battle. From the Vickers gun posts, prisoners can be seen fleeing the battle zone till each running figure becomes distinct. Some are used to carry the wounded of both armies. An iron cross is among the effects found on one prisoner in this first informal search. No longer a moving patch of grey, the enemy now has a face and a name. Wilhelm. Otto. Hans. Ludwig. And when the fighting subsides, there is rest, both for the men and for the guns. Now the working parties go up to make the trenches secure by digging and wiring. While in the shade of Henencourt Wood, a roll call measures losses. Through Ypres, past the Cloth Hall, through the Menin Gate. Troops from Pozières now move again. Some of them are to have a few days' leave to follow their time on the Somme. Then once more, life in the trenches with the same hardships, the same routine. Every kind of transport must be used. Canals, railways built by military engineers. The roads are choked and they are deteriorating with the bad weather and the unaccustomed loads. movement slows and sometimes stops. Continuous artillery pounding has removed most of the recognizable features of the landscape, and rain is to reduce this area to a bog marked with jumping-off tapes. Though here, supplies can still be moved to the front, and the broken stream of wounded and prisoners still pours back. The worst cases are evacuated to Britain. For those who remained on the Somme, a welcome break is mail call. To the Australians, it brings news from a home front where William Morris Hughes, now Prime Minister, wishes to replace the appalling losses of Pozières with troops raised by conscription against severe opposition from some members of his own party, Dr. Mannix, the Roman Catholic coadjutor Archbishop of Melbourne, and the trade union movement, one of whose officials is tarred and feathered by returned servicemen. On conscription, a referendum votes no, and recruiting actually drops. Again at the end of 1917, when the losses of the Passchendaele offensive create an impossible demand for new troops, the issue is to be put to the vote. And after 3 years of war, a new referendum gives the same answer. Before the end of the First Battle of the Somme, Commander-in-Chief Haig's policy of wearing away the enemy costs the Australian forces 23,000 officers and men in less than 7 weeks. British losses are 415,000 as both sides dig in for the long, harsh winter of 1916-17. With the rain, supply roads become impassable. The hardship of moving through the mud makes a journey of 6 miles take 9 to 12 hours. Sometimes a man will find himself trapped in the mud, unable to draw himself free. Even the familiar lightweight French 75 cannot be moved without becoming bogged. Fodder consumes more shipping tonnage than is lost to enemy U-boats, though the thousands of horses of the cavalry are useless here. Repair work on roads must creep toward the front line while the Allies and Germans alike suffer cold, rain, and frostbite. The bulky silent film camera cannot be taken into the worst mud. Here, even the trees still stand. Duckboards finally begin to bring some relief. Movement becomes possible. There is a dry footing. With the snows, the white earth becomes hard, and men can again move across it. In the Egyptian campaign, the mounted troops used a 4/5 Anzacs, though their artillery is British. The end of the cool season has removed the fear of a major Turkish attack, and General Murray follows a policy of sending forces into the Sinai Desert to intercept enemy movement rather than hold the Suez Canal line. At the beginning of August, the Battle of Romani is to prove a decisive reverse for the Turks, convincing the British government of the wisdom of a further advance to El Arish, where supply ships are unloaded by the native surf boatmen, though the slightest swell can make this too hazardous. The Egyptian laborers receive 4 piastres, 10 pence a day. It is considered generous. A hill of fodder is raised for the light horse, again fighting as a mounted force. Indians, Egyptians, Englishmen, Australians and New Zealanders. All these are involved in the construction of the military railway which is being pushed from the Suez Canal across the desert into Palestine. Beside it runs a 12-inch pipe of water from the Nile. The dust cloud raised by the use of artillery in the desert is often used by enemy observers to spot its position and bring down a counter barrage. Alongside the artillery, the infantry used the plum pudding, the toffee apple trench mortar. Vickers guns delay repairs on the wire. In October 1917, on the third attack, Gaza falls to the forces of the new commander, General Allenby. The light horse swing towards Beersheba on the right wing. Their heavy guns are being drawn by tractors, which can handle loads beyond the strength of the horses. The Cameleers, too, are able to move through waterless country, going where horses may not, and attacking the rearward defenses of Beersheba. The daily necessity of finding water for the horses makes the battle desperate. The 4th and 12th regiments charge on horseback with bayonets, passing through the Turkish lines with few losses. Others attack dismounted. And Beersheba falls. Here on Darb el-Sultani, the road of the kings, the Anzacs pass where the pharaohs, the Persians, the Romans, Alexander the Great and Napoleon have gone before them. They are led by Sir Harry Chevelle. Columns of mounted prisoners pour in. Though it has only been formed a year, the Camel Corps takes an active and valuable part in the campaign. Red Cross wagons carry the wounded. The Turkish rearguard on foot are captured by the mounted men. Many need medical attention. A bivouac in the desert gives time for men, horses and equipment to be prepared for the next phase. Now that Gaza has fallen, the object is to capture Jerusalem. The port of Jaffa is taken without a shot being fired. Sheltered by reefs, its position on the Mediterranean gives it a great strategic value. Though German air power has been superior, their bombing does not change the campaign. And Allied pilots, those of the No. 1 Squadron of the Australian Flying Corps among them, are the first of Allenby's men to see Jerusalem. Below them, the triangular walled Garden of Gethsemane and the Mosque of Omar, built on the site of David's stronghold, Zion. Turkish forces are swept before the advance after some sharp encounters. But on December the 11th, 1917, entering Jerusalem through the old Jaffa Gate, General Allenby becomes the city's 24th conqueror. Some say it is to show contempt for the spectacle of the Kaiser's entry through a specially blasted gateway 9 years earlier. But he comes on foot without either flag or band, at the head of a force dressed for battle and not for parade. With him are the English, Scots, Gurkhas and Australians who have taken the city, with New Zealanders, French and Italians represented. The cheers of the crowd are nervous and uncertain. At the citadel, he hears martial law proclaimed in the 9 languages of the city and the invading forces. The city streets fill with Australian troops. They walk the Via Dolorosa. They water their horses on the Mount of Olives, and for the first time in 3 years, the men can sleep in houses. But they must move out along the road to Jericho. Allenby's objectives have not yet been reached. In Europe, as the winter of 1916-17 lifts, the Germans have shortened their front and withdrawn to the newly finished Hindenburg Line. When Bapaume village is occupied, it is in ruins. Here, the cameraman's field of view circles through 360 degrees, recording the destruction, and the troops attempt to clear away the debris among the still smoking rubble. It is now March 1917. For men who had spent winter in the trenches in sight of these red roofs, they had come to mean comfort, shelter, civilization. The retreating Germans have blown out shop fronts and destroyed everything they could. Not one tree or plant remains. One building is left standing by the enemy. No one can understand why the town hall remains. A delayed action mine explodes days later, trapping those inside. Of those the rescuers dig out. 6 are still alive. Tired troops move. In the open country, which gives no shelter from the fire of the Hindenburg Line's artillery, their whiz-bangs, the 77s, and their crumps, the 5.9 high explosives. A new concept in warfare, the land battleship, has a new name. Its code word, the tank. Though this new weapon is still slow and unreliable, it is nevertheless hoped that it will end the standstill war. Under this protection, troops can approach the enemy lines, and the machine gun nests and barbed wire entanglements, which have become a standard form of protection, will not stop them. Here, for one moment in history, they advance with the cavalry they will make obsolete. Where the tanks fail, the troops must attack without artillery support, through the wire. Aerial bombing is increasing. Here, with the fur cap, the most famous of the aviators is the German, Baron Manfred von Richthofen, leader of the Red Battle Circus. The flyers of both air forces formed a strange brotherhood despite their bitter conflicts. Their code of chivalry is the last phase of the war conducted to rules among gentlemen, a concept ground to extinction by mass-produced weapons and mass communication of propaganda ideas. Australian airmen in their Sopwiths joined battle. Retreating, the Germans have destroyed the locks and bridges in a land intersected by rivers. Now, military engineers must reconstruct everything needed for the new Allied advance. This road has been cut through the middle of a cemetery, and the caissons go rolling along. Raids go on as gunners pour out of an old German strongpoint to lay down the box barrage the raiders will need. The raids bring back prisoners with information that may be vital, and the prisoners are the best protection, though a shell has no friend or enemy. In a trench, they face unexpectedly the camera. Hold it. Right, move on. Next one. Keep the line moving. Some walk and some are carried, wounded and sound side by side in a grotesque parade that leads to the shipping point for the prison camp. Here the enemies are routine, disease, hunger, sameness, lice, and boredom. This detailed relief map of the area is prepared before the Battle of Messines. It shows every road, every building, every tree, and troops spend days studying it against maps and their own lines before they move out to be marched to the battle zone. Preparations like these are more elaborate than those of any other British operation to date. Hessian screens along the roads shield the movement of men and supplies from enemy observers as the build-up goes on. British shelling is now heavier than before, and the guns are supplied. This 12-inch naval gun can blast road and railway junctions many miles beyond the fighting lines. Below the ground, the tunnelers are at work on mines under the enemy positions. Listening for their sapping suggests that enemy countermining is close. When this is confirmed, work must be hurried. The galleries are packed with explosive. 19 such mines have been driven under the enemy lines at Messines and Hill 60, sometimes at 14 feet a day. Each one carries an immense charge, 50 or 70,000 pounds of ammo. The attack signal at 0 hour on 0 day, 3:10 on June 7th, 1917, is to be their detonation. The advance is completed. 2 hours and 20 minutes later, Messines is taken and the consolidation troops move up. The cost has been 26,000 Allied lives, half of them Anzacs, with as many among the enemy. The wounded are cared for in advanced hospitals and some shipped back to England with leave convoys, now that British battleships dominate the North Sea. Observation planes are alert for submarines. Blimps also circle above the fleet. Camouflaged merchant ships become troop ships, are shepherded by destroyers. Torpedo tubes, ready for the white line of a periscope breaking the surface. Y guns fire depth charges. In this way, the submarine menace has been almost eliminated. Down the gangways of the leave ships, a digger with a Blighty label on his tunic is headed for Horsefree Road Depot before he sets out to see London. Far from Trafalgar Square, Ypres is a quagmire in which the transports become bogged down. The infantry uses tump lines, an Indian method, to move crates of bombs to the front lines. Canadian engineers are experts in laying railways at speed, and here the camera travels with a load of shells from the end of the broad gauge line. advances of Messines and Ypres have been made step by step under the cover of artillery like these 8-inch howitzers. Shells would explode on contact, scattering fragments up to half a mile and raising a protective dust cloud. Deafened by the incessant blasting of the artillery, this German prisoner can't even hear questions. With the collapse of the Russian front, this third Ypres campaign has become crucial for the Allies. The war is no longer a matter of seizing territory, but of exhausting the resources of all powers. Issues that mean nothing to these two men who might have killed one another an hour before. Already, Austria and Italy are weakening, and even Germany and Britain are feeling the strain of the prolonged confrontation. While in the trenches, the routine of life continues as it has been, with the only release coming with meal breaks. A serving of the coarse army biscuits called Anzac wafers by the Australians. On September 20th, 1917, in the Battle of the Menin Road, for the first time, 2 Australian divisions attacked together. Another 2 in the Battle of Polygon Wood on September 26th, and 3 at the Battle of Broodseinde on October 4th. It costs the 5 Australian divisions 38,000 casualties in 8 weeks, and makes the problem of replacement forces an impossible one. The British and German armies each lose 400,000. The losses are considered lighter than the Somme. From the 4th of October, bad weather makes aerial observation impossible, and shells fall harmless into the mud or have their blasts smothered. The men must advance unprotected across what one historian is to compare to the bottom of some upheaved ocean. Some are unable to go on, surrounded by the desperation, the stench of war. In Persia, along the Asadabad Pass, a column of Christian Armenian refugees come, leaving certain Turkish massacre, raided by Kurd tribesmen. Typhus, cholera, malaria, and famine claim 40,000 of the 80,000 who begin the trek. Once 9 soldiers hold back several hundred raiders from the weak and wounded left by the better mounted and armed refugees. The Assyrian Armenian Regular Brigade is raised from those men able to pass the medical inspection, under officers and men of the Dunster Force, the selected Empire troops of General Dunsterville representing the Allies in Mesopotamia. Though Russia has withdrawn from the war, support comes from the Bolshevik government, who fear the loss of Baku with its important oil fields. British troops from the 39th Brigade march in, though it is the workmen who must be organized into the main force. Dunsterville, aware of the importance of British prestige, organizes a program of famine relief in a city where food is scarce and even water is rationed, as tension grows and the population streams out by every means. British and Russian artillery and sorties into the desert by Rolls-Royce armored cars can hold the enemy for only a short time, and finally Dunsterville must withdraw his forces with the wounded from an adventure like the one Kipling builds around him in Storky and Company. In Europe, the Allies face a new effort by Hindenburg and Ludendorff with reserves from the Russian front, in a final effort to split the British and French armies and to capture the Channel ports. In March, this Michael offensive falls on the British sector at St. Quentin and quickly overruns the old Somme battlefield. Australians are among the reinforcements who are rushed from Flanders by train and by motor lorry to hold the important railway junction of Amiens. Though the Australians pass many troops withdrawing, the British still fight desperately to stop the advance, and beside them they hold the Germans at Hebuterne, Dernancourt and Villers-Bretonneux. The British artillery has galloped into position in support. The battlefield has engulfed towns and villages not previously touched, and from these refugees pour. Here there are only a few, and the troops can help trundle what they have been able to save down the Arrow Strait Roman road. Villers-Bretonneux, all of it that still stands. This has been the key to Amiens. Here on the 14th and 24th of April, the Germans are held and the line stabilized. Now in the streets you see only our troops and their French allies from the Moroccan division, scavenging for anything of use, resting in fresh country. The camera travels with the Australians, recording these panoramas of light horsemen on their whalers, and the Red Cross wagons with them in Palestine, winding across the stony plains towards Jericho and into the Jordan Valley, 1,000 feet below sea level, in the summer, when no native will face the heat, dust, scorpions, centipedes, and malaria mosquitoes. The Jordan River flowing into the Sea of Galilee. Camel cacolets carry the wounded where wheeled transport cannot go. The Arab villagers wait, unsure of the final victory, as the troops advance towards Tiberias. Allenby's strategy is to drive forward and unite with the Arabs of Colonel Lawrence. His infantry breaks through on the coastal sector and Chauvel's Desert Mounted Corps sweeps into the east. Thousands of prisoners are taken among the retreating Turks, who are harassed from the air by the Flying Corps, Sir Ross Smith among its pilots. The way is lined with abandoned enemy equipment. Surrender has now become automatic. And here in the Circassian village of El Kunitra, the white flag is held by the mayor. A hard ride brings British cavalry and the Australian Mounted Division to Damascus on October the 1st, and the entry of the troops restores order among the population, some 300,000 strong. Now the light horse rides along the street called Strait, beside the Barada River. The infantry march in, and with them are Lawrence's Arab troops. Emir Faisal enters the Victoria Hotel to confer with General Allenby. These people are unused to towns, and it is only when they leave that problems of supply and keeping order are eased. At the same time, from the city, Chauvel with the 5th Indian Cavalry Division pushes on to Lebanon, Syria, Aleppo, Tripoli, and Homs. The Bengal Lancers, and with them are the Turkish ox transports still under their drivers. armored cars overtake men and horses. Always there are the thousands of sick and wounded who must be cared for, though hospital conditions are appalling. Now Bulgaria surrenders, and Turkey after her presses for a separate peace. But in France and Flanders, men still die violently. This is a daylight raid. They become a regular feature in the Australian sectors at Haasbroek, Hebuterne and Villers-Bretonneux in the summer of 1918, replacing the set raids with box barrages of the British and Canadian sectors. They achieve their objectives: to cut out German posts, erode the enemy line, and weaken morale. Each man feels as big as a church. He risks his life. When one falls here, he doesn't get up smiling when the camera stops cranking. At Riveri, deserted gardens offer fresh vegetables. There is a chance to bathe and wash the horses. A Chinese labor corps with the Australians in France. Now, finally, Australians come into contact with the American troops. The force of their numbers and resources is added to the final weight needed to crush the enemy. And all the while, an endless line of British troops moves to the front. The new Whippet tanks are fast, 16 miles an hour, faster than a man on foot. They can reverse and maneuver. They are used at Hamel on the 4th of July. And on August 8th, 450 tanks grind through German lines. Ludendorff calls August 8th the Black Day of the German army in this war. To keep pace with the withdrawing Germans, the guns are sometimes galloped into battle, as they were in Wellington's time. An hour before, the Germans were defending Waufusi-Abencourt. Now it is a high road. The double-span bridge near Chipilly is smashed by the Germans, who do not realize that the longer span can be replaced on the supports of the shorter. When the 3rd Pioneer Battalion repairs the bridge in 6 days, Sir John Monash wins a 1,000-franc bet from an English general. In July 1918, when the Prime Minister visits the front, Monash meets William Morris Hughes in the Perron Square, while the official party is in this sector. This German 14-inch gun is still in the position in the Arcy Wood, from which it has shelled the railway station at Amiens before being destroyed by the retreating Germans on August 8th. Now, veterans of 1918 can at last be spared for Anzac leave, seeing home after 4 years of war. On October the 8th, 1918, Austria crumbles in the face of an Italian offensive. 18 days later, Ludendorff is dismissed. At Kiel, the German Navy mutinies. The army is forced back to Ghent, Mons, Mézières, and Sedan. The Kaiser's abdication is announced, and President Hebert offers a surrender based on Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. Peace celebrations break out everywhere in Europe. As part of the takeover of enemy warplant, Australian airmen control this German base at Cologne. This enormous Gotha bomber will never fly. We see how light this captured British fighter is. Milking sheep is one of the activities found as troops move through Belgium as the rhythm of peacetime life resumes. Other activities are more traditional. Many European children have never known a real Christmas, and soldiers distribute gifts among them. The time comes for officers and men to say goodbye as battalions are broken into drafts. Along the old European roads, trucks carry homeward bound men to rail points. Now is the time for piling gear, for stacking weapons. The AIF education scheme and non-military employment are the names given to the ways found to keep the men active as they wait for shipment back to Australia. General Haig and the Prince of Wales watch the final parades. They march past Americans, French, Portuguese, Italians, Japanese, Poles, Romanians. No other war is to make such a vivid impression on the Australian mind. Lloyd George and the royal family see them go. If the war's dead were to march here, their ranks would take 11 days to pass the saluting base. 60,000 Australians alone have died. Their lives have bought a legend which still marks every phase of Australia's life.